So this is part of a mini-series talking about all the aspects of a capitalist system, and today we're talking about interest rates. In past videos I've spoken about what actually is an interest rate. Today in this one we're going to talk about what's the involvement of Bank of England and how do they set this Bank of England base rate. Why do they do it? How does it come about? Well, let's get cracking with it. So the Bank of England is the independent bank of the country that sets the rate of interest. Why do they do that? Is because they can control the amount of borrowing and lending that happens. Why is that important? Is because when the economy is overheating, so there's too much money supply, lots of people are buying everything, and you remember the run on the housing in the last certainly the last 5 years or so, where after quick quantitative easing post-COVID as well, quantitative easing happened in 2007 and 8. Post-COVID, lots of money flew into the economy via furlough. Lots of money was into the system, and that lots of money not being spent is chasing few assets, and that's why the property boom happened in 2020 onwards. So what's the relationship between that and interest rate that the Bank of England sets? Is because when the Bank of England had base rate at 0.1%, it's never happened in history, but it did happen during COVID. That means the banks who lends to people, you and I, are borrowing at virtually nothing, and then they lend to us and at that time it was around, for a buy-to-let, it was around 3%, 3.5%. So they were making quite hefty profits by borrowing from the Bank of England. So borrowing from the Bank of England was 0.1, they were lending at 3%. Lots of money was flowing into the economy, and lots of people were borrowing that money to buy pretty much every asset they can get their hands on, whether it's gold, houses, second-hand cars. Remember how crazy the prices went. So what's the then intervention that the Bank of England can do? And one of the biggest metrics they have to control the money supply is interest rate. So if they set the amount that the interest or the money is going to cost. So at COVID it was 0.1%. Right now we at 5.25% is the bank base rate, which is ridiculously more expensive than what it was only 3 years ago. And the reason why that is because of inflation. And in another video I talk about the inflation interest rate relationship. But for now, the interest base rate went from 0.1 in 2020 to 5.25 in 2024. That is an that's 50 times increase in the last 4 years. Why did that happen? Is because inflation was rampant. So the amount of money in the economy chasing the amount of goods, the money was there, the amount of goods was there, and too much money was chasing too few goods. That's properties, houses, cars, jewelry, Rolexes, everything. And when too much money is chasing too few goods, the prices of these goods really rise. And that's the problem, because then that inflates the prices of a house that would have been, say, 250 grand to 300,000 pounds, because too many people are chasing that same goods, and they've got lots of cheap money to buy those goods. And the reason why Bank of England has a job to increase the cost of that capital, and they do that via increasing the Bank of England base rate. And in this case, they went from 0.1% to 5.25% as at March 24, is because they reduce the amount of people that are willing to then borrow at 5.25. Because if bank base rate is 5.25, that means lending rate, as you and I are finding with as investors, we're paying somewhere around the 6.5%, 7% on buy-to-let properties. So that is astronomical amount of money in comparison to, let's say, 3-4 years before Liz Truss, and that disastrous budget happened in 2023, I think now. The interest rate being charged on a buy-to-let was around 3.75. Now it's around 7%. So Bank of England regulates the amount of money there is in the system by regulating the amount of interest they charge on the money lent. And again, just to finish off, it used to be 0.1% historically, the lowest it's ever been in history, and now it's at 5.25 base rate, which means lending rate is around 7%, because the commercial banks, the HSBC, the NatWest, borrow from the Bank of England, and they charge them this, they have to add an extra bit for themselves to then provide that service. And that's why lending rate is around 7 when Bank of England base rate is around 5.25. If you're on a residential 5.25 base, you're probably paying 6-ish% on your residential home mortgage, which is still almost triple what it was 3 years ago. So that is the relationship of interest rate, Bank of England, money supply. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about the relationship between inflation and interest rate and how does one taper the other one.